Well, hello, good morning, and welcome to our latest Bath Life Business Surgery, this time about residential property with Mogers Drewett. I hope this finds you well in these continuingly weird times. Here we are in lockdown 2.0, the slightly disappointing sequel. It's deja vu all over again, up to a point. Still, it'll be over soon, at least that phase will be over, and we'll discover what new world we land in on December 2nd or 3rd, post this second lockdown. I hope in current times that you've been navigating your way through, both personally and professionally. We all are having to cope, all having to react, all having to figure out new ways of working and indeed living. Today we'll be exploring the Bath residential property sector, pricing, transactions, stamp duty effect, the resilience of Bath, the working from home factors, what that does for domestic properties. But we'll also, quite intriguingly, be talking about a career switch from one of our speakers today, moving from the world of being a property agent for many, many years to working within a legal firm, and during this lockdown, or at least during this pandemic. Prior to then, some parish notices. First up, about our awards, and I'm going to dwell on the bit of the Bath Property Awards, partly because of proximity, partly also because they are headline sponsored by the company involved today, which is Mogers Drewett, and our thanks to them. With the Bath Property Awards, we're switching to an ambitious and creative new approach aiming to deliver value and engagement to all in the property sector, every single part of the value chain. There's no point in trying to chase the sunset and keep putting the dates back again and again, hoping that we can run them together as we have done previously. There's also no point here as elsewhere in just hunkering down. Hope is not a strategy. You don't generate business by mothballing it and wishing it were all as it once were. Instead, you've just got to find ways of getting on with it. And that's what we're doing with the Bath Property Awards. We've created a unique three-stage property conference called the Bath Property Symposium. 3 elements. 1, thought leadership, plenary sessions about national level insights with keynote speakers on resi and commercial property. Secondly, networking, unique sponsor-based hubs giving both structured and randomized networking, the latter replicating the happenstance of live events. It's a little like more a Bath rugby box than it is a traditional sort of online event. It's much more interactive, much more engaging than that. And thirdly, excellence, celebrating the excellence of the enduring excellence of the property sector, and the city teams with clever property businesses doing great things for our city now and in the near future. So we're celebrating with our awards, celebrating the very best of the sector. Live presented in a bespoke studio, recorded sponsor films and inserts, plus live reveals. Subsequently, there will also be an exclusive real-life event later in the spring for all our sponsors, finalists and delegates. The awards will run on March 12th. The event will run as soon as we're able to run it in real life beyond that, whichever month that might be. I have to say, it has been superb how much our sponsors are backing this new approach. They get the point. We're all having to move towards different business models. We all want our teams out there, but there is no out there to get to. Therefore, we have to create events such as this, which will be the largest gathering of property executives and senior people anywhere in the city, all the way since our last Bath Property Awards in November 2019. Big thanks to our sponsors, of course, our headliners, Mogers Drewett, plus APS Homes, Orchid Joinery, L&C Mortgages, Spaces, so that's Regis, SWBF, and Triangle Networks. Please do talk to us about how you can get involved. There aren't the opportunities for us to generate business, to share stories, to partner up with that there were previously. There aren't those networking opportunities, and that's what the Bath Property Awards will give on March 12th. One other on the Bath Property Awards, the nominations for those close next week, just next Thursday, 26th November, which is not that long. And of course, we all know that this has been a challenging year for many within the sector, as it has in other sectors. And the nominations will reflect that. We're very mindful of the experiences that businesses are going through, and to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Now is a great time to celebrate what your teams have been doing. They need your support every bit as much as Bath itself needs the support of brilliant property businesses. Our second major awards, of course, are the Bath Life Awards, They are now being held on May 27th at the Assembly Rooms once more, as uber glam and as celebratory as ever. And if anything, that's yet more needed, of course, in these times. It would be magical and catalytic to bring everyone together in that place to celebrate the very best of Bath. As in previous years, demand for tickets already means that none will go on open sale. To be involved, you have to be involved. It's a bit like that. If it's in the game, it's in the game. To be involved, you have to be involved. Simple as that, either as a finalist or as a sponsor. Nominations for those will open early next year. And our thanks to our current roster of sponsors. We would say on sponsorship here, as with the Property Awards, it's up to all of us to try to generate the business which we need in 2021. What has happened in 2020 has gone, pretty much. We can't do anything about that, but we can influence the future and direction of our business and the growth of our teams. Thanks to our current roster of sponsors, from the front, led by the headliners, Royal Crescent Hotel and Spa, plus Apex City of Bath Hotel, Bath Audi, Marsh Commercial, Minuteman Press, Novia, Savills, Spaces, Regis once more, and Stone King, and some outfit called Bath Life, but you're unsurprised about that. Please do talk with our teams about either of our two awards. Forthcoming business clubs and surgeries, we've got another session coming up on 1st of December with Mogers Drewett, and this time it's about exploring private client and financial planning, getting your house in order for 2021. Our speakers then will be David Hill, Rebecca Beresford, and Stuart Doughty. All of us are having to figure new ways of planning our lives and our business financing, and that will be, we hope, a really useful, really interesting session. Look, also on the 14th of December, a couple of weeks, whatever it's 11 days before Christmas, for a special about charities and Christmas in Bath. Talk to us about how you can be involved. Charities have had a particularly hard time this year, at a time when their services are, if anything, way more needed than ever previously. Their funding has been constrained, their access to events has been denied. Our charities need our support. Please join us on the 14th of December, where we will discuss with those charities some of the matters that they face, but really how they're responding and what their plans are for 2021. Again, in this roster of thank yous, thank you also for your continuing support for Bath Life. You help us help Bath celebrate its infinite excellence, and we hope that we help you generate business and employment, which underpins this city's success. Just one last, it's this. We're holding another wine tasting fundraiser for the Bath Community Shop in Twerton this Wednesday. It's an initiative with the Bath Life award-winning 8 Stony Street. Details are on social media and on our emails. Do good drinking. That's the approach. As if we need an excuse for that, who knows? Right, to business. Today I'll be interviewing Alison Treble of Mogers Drewett and their new signing, Patrick Brady. A surname, some of you will know Patrick already, but some of you will also, of course, know the surname Brady as being part of the Savills tribe with Luke running the Bath and other offices here. Patrick now is on board with Mogers Drewett. I'll be talking to him, of course, about his expertise and what he'll be bringing to Mogers Drewett, but also from a personal point of view, what it has been like moving from one sector to another. Please do send your questions in using the tab at the bottom. They can be anonymous if you wish, or we can name you if you prefer. I'll bring those in during the meeting. This webinar will be available on the Bath Life YouTube channel shortly, later today, and many will access that. Our experience is that perhaps at least as many as twice the number of people who watch it live will watch it subsequently. If it's good, share it. If it isn't, then but it should be good because we've got 2 great speakers. Talking of which, let's bring them forward, please. Let's hear from Patrick Brady and Alison Treble. Would you like to step onto the virtual roster? And whilst you're doing that and clicking your buttons, as it were, good morning. I'll just give you a quick bit of bio. So Patrick Brady has joined as Business Development Manager. 20 years nearly experience within and managing residential sales businesses covering Dorset, Wiltshire, Somerset and Hampshire. Most notably 10 years with Savills in Salisbury. Patrick is based in Sherborne, where Mogers Drewett has an office, but is working across all its offices. Responsible for creating new partnerships as well as building on existing ones with a variety of professional property professionals. Patrick's a former rugby player, very sporty man with 2 sporty children as well. Alison Treble, a very familiar face for a long time on the Bath property circuit, an experienced lawyer, worked in law for 18 years, having completed your legal executive training and qualified with a large Bristol firm in 2006, and worked in residential property in Bath since then, qualifying as solicitor in 2008. Particular experience of high-value, complex transactions, which is what we're going to be talking about today, at least in part. So Alison, perhaps if we start with Mogers and how the property work has been in recent times, and I'll also say good morning, by the way. So good morning.
Good morning, and good morning, everybody. So for us, the lockdown 2.0, as you called it, the disappointing sequel, has actually been better, unsurprisingly, than lockdown number one. What we found with the first time round was that everything was on hold. There was a great deal of uncertainty, and a lot of people went to ground, completely understandably. And then the minute that restrictions started to be lifted, the expectation was that you could just pick up where you left off and turn it around very, very quickly, ignoring the fact that everybody had been sat still for 3 months at a time. This time round, I think the government has been much clearer on keeping the market open. The intention is there to enable transactions to proceed, to enable all the preamble to when lawyers get involved to carry on as well. And it's been much better. And I think what that shows is that there is a real understanding now that a healthy housing market is better for the economy as a whole and enables the growth that the economy will desperately need at the end of lockdown 2 or lockdown 3, 4, whatever we end up with. So it's been a much better experience this time round.
And I suspect also in property, as in all other sectors, most people have worked out a way of doing business,
Yes.
even if it isn't the same way as previously, with that much more experience. Clearly, and very sadly, certain sectors cannot operate in these times. And I'm sure none of us are blithe about that. But property agents and legal companies figured a way in the spring when lockdown was more restrictive, and you're now, to some extent, having benefit from that. Is that how you see it?
Yes, and it's made us more agile in the way that we liaise with clients, the way that we liaise with other property professionals that we deal with. It's pushed us to, as lawyers, you can imagine, we're very cautious. It's pushed us to be braver in how we innovate and how we contact clients, and the way that we get our communications out there in a way which is less of a traditional lawyer approach. So it has been beneficial in that sense, though probably speedier than we would have achieved it otherwise.
Yeah, that's one of the paradoxes of the pandemic, that it's a time of great pause, but in a strange way, also a time of great acceleration, that changes are brought forth that might have taken years, possibly decades to
Yeah.
Innovations and changes such as bringing on a property agent, Patrick, into your fold. We'll come on to from your point of view, Patrick, in just a sec, but I'd like to hear from Mogers' perspective. This is pretty rare, bringing someone in a senior frontline position without the specific legal skills. Clearly, loads of experience of dealing with lawyers and understanding that world, but this is right in the core offer. So why have you taken Patrick on?
It's just about, a lot of law firms talk about being different, and everybody strives to be different. And this is from a desire to do different, not just talk about it. And what this role does is bridges the gap between estate agency and professional introducers and what we need as lawyers. Because what we're finding with, particularly at the moment where there is pressure on timeframes and stamp duty holidays and that sort of thing, what this role does is makes that transition and that introduction a lot smoother, which means we can start quicker, which means we can get to the end quicker. And what that does also means that it frees up our lawyers to concentrate on being really good lawyers and delivering service to the clients who need it when they're in the thick of the transaction, without having our people thinking about where's the next job coming from? How do I manage my income pipeline? It just relieves that pressure on them to free them up to do the bit that they are brilliant at without having to have a sales pressure as well.
Well, there we are, Patrick. It's a slightly odd and maybe even surreal experience being talked about publicly, and you've not yet said a word. So we'll say hello to you and welcome you to this gathering. How are you doing?
Yeah, morning, Greg. Morning, everyone. Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you're in a tie, sir, as well. Ties aren't us in current times, in many people's cases, including my own. So you're booted and suited. Is that your traditional garb?
I would say that it's been my traditional garb for the best part of 20 odd years. I don't recollect wearing a tie post the first lockdown, actually. So if I get a bit choked up, apologies.
Oh, it'll be the emotion rather than the tie, I'm sure. So
definitely.
Tell us this point about it is a career change. It's a very closely related in many respects. But tell us what motivated you to change, and to what extent the pandemic played any part in that, about thinking about why you do what you do.
Yeah, I think that the only answer I can really give will sound sort of terribly patriotic, I would have thought, but effectively the reason for the career change was purely and simply because of the vision that Mogers Drewett had, and what they came to me with, and what we discussed. Blimey, I mean, there couldn't really be a worse year to embark upon such a thing. But I suppose that shows the faith that they have in me as an individual and as an employee, and I do as them as a firm, really. And but yeah, so really the vision of trying to make the relationships better, to make the processes better, to bridge gaps and divides between agents and solicitors, exactly as Alison said.
And do you think one can see the positives and the business link and the insider understanding that you undoubtedly will bring after all these years of experience? But do you think just personally you might actually miss elements of the thrust of deal making, of getting sales over the line?
Without a doubt, actually, and I think the important thing to say is the reason for moving is because the project was very interesting, gave me some different ideas and different things to focus on, different training to undertake, which won't be quick, and will certainly be very, very interesting. So, but yes, and I've said it before already, actually, since I started the new role at the beginning of October. There are absolutely elements of it I miss, but I suppose it's probably been slightly amplified by certain restrictions and not being able to see, people and your contacts in the way in which you normally would. Certainly now since this latest lockdown, although watered down. As Alison's already mentioned, it still prevents you from being able to see people and have that human interaction, really. So there will definitely be elements of it, but hopefully what we can make this role and what we can do with it is actually be much more involved with the agents within that process.
Yeah. Well, let's come on to the process of deals happening from a legal perspective, an agent's perspective. I'll start with a critical question, and it's in the context particularly of the stamp duty holiday, which runs out, at least in theory, March 31st. Not about Mogers, but about legal companies generally, about process. Why does it take so long for deals to happen? What is in the process which is inherently, 8, 10, 12 weeks more sometimes?
So it's a mixture of things, really. As lawyers, we are, and rightly so, the main point of contact for somebody who is going through a sale or a purchase transaction. And that's absolutely what we do, and that's vital to the advice that we give and protecting what is people's biggest investment, and realising those ambitions or whatever it is that clients have for their particular move. Part of that role is massively juggling lots of things that we can't control. So, for example, at the moment, we know that nationally, there are about 40% of local authorities are taking about 2 months to deliver search results. So from our point of view, there are alternatives that we can discuss with clients, but also it might work for the client, but it may not work for the mortgage lender. There are things that might work for the lender, but the clients aren't keen on or doesn't work for them. So that's just one example of where, as much as we can do our bit quickly, there's a vast amount of that search information that we just can't get without going through that search process. Similarly with mortgage lenders and things at the moment, I've had members of my team trying to get figures, for example, when you want to pay back a mortgage, and I've had members of the team sat on the phones for 2-3 hours at a time because the lenders still have got lots of people at home, lots of people on furlough. So what would have been, sometimes maybe if it was a 20-minute job, that was a bad job, but something like that, which takes hours now. And our job in terms of helping clients through that process is absorbing all of that, but also then trying to manage expectations as well. So there's an awful lot that we can do and we can be proactive on, but there's an awful lot which is chasing things that we just have to make ourselves a nuisance of for the poor people at the bank who are on the end of the phone. But that's a massive part of what we do is trying to juggle it and time it so that it all comes together.
You're not saying this, but just to sort of tease it out, do you think at times some clients just actually don't quite understand the complexities that you're navigating in any case, but particularly in these times?
I think that's a fair observation, and I think because, as I say, because we are the ones that have the most communication, it is very difficult for clients sometimes to understand where those blockages might be, and as much as we do a lot around trying to get clients to understand the timing and also the bits that clients can be responsible for, so it's not just us chasing, but so that we're working in partnership with them. Sometimes it's the volume of having to chase those calls or chase those searches or whatever it is, and that's something which nobody really anticipates until you're in the thick of it. So we do a lot around trying to manage expectations, trying to be realistic, but also we are balancing the fact that people have fallen in love with somewhere and they want to be there as quickly as they can, and that's always a very fine line that we have to try and get right.
So it's an inherently complex process. You're the sort of guardian, essentially. It's more than that, but you're the guardian of that process, and that it's made worse through essentially bottlenecking, one, stamp duty, but two, because of working from home and so on. So that's the sort of terrain in which you're operating. Patrick, how's that seemed to you working within that? By the way, when did you join Mogers Drewett?
1st of October.
1st of October, so you've had 6-7 weeks or so. Has it already been an eye-opener, that understanding more closely of process, or have you not yet been exposed to that in that way?
I'm trying very hard to see as much of it as we can, actually. So years and years and years ago, when I was with Carter Jonas in Bath, so probably I'd say 8-9 years or so ago, actually, Mogers and Alison specifically very kindly did a process for one of our younger members of staff that myself and David McKenzie sort of joined in with as well. And actually, what's really, really nice is it doesn't matter how many times or how experienced you are and how well you think you know the process. A bit like how agency changes and the trends change, and so it's very, very much the trends within the legal process do as well. So just because searches may be taking longer in some places than others, that will then shift round. And actually something that we can do, that we will be doing, is trying to share as much of that information that we get from the local authorities in terms of searches, and try and get on the front foot and share that with agents, so that we can be more joined up with our mutual clients. But in terms of looking at the process, yeah, I mean, it's complex, it's time consuming, it's very, very interesting seeing it from this side. as someone that always tried very, very hard to spend time talking with solicitors, and obviously worked with a lot of solicitors, some good and some not quite so good. But it's really the level of communication, between the two parties that is the real key, because the agent's working extremely hard, the solicitor's working just as hard, and in different ways. And the key to understanding it is actually both parties want the same thing. Both parties want the same result for the client.
And Patrick, you'll have had this, I'm sure, as an agent, and Alison, you'll have seen this in Mogers world, where clients say, yeah, I hear all of that, but this has got to happen in 2 weeks for whatever reason. It has to happen. If I came to you with that perspective, maybe not, thumping the table, but if I came with that perspective, how would you respond? Could you expedite really swiftly? And what would it need for those sorts of deals to happen fast?
So from a legal perspective, there are certain things we can do. There are certain, I hate to say it, but there are certain insurance products and things that can support a purchase in a particular speed. The flip side of that is that we then spend a lot of time then advising clients what those things don't cover, rather than giving them the best information about what it is they're actually buying. So there are alternatives, but there is nothing really that can replace the proper due diligence over the actual time it takes to be going through that process. It's always very hard to guarantee that something will happen in a particular time, and that's not just because of where we are now, but that's true of the market anyway. What we can do is offer a guarantee that we will do it properly, and we will do it as quickly as we can, and that we will work with everybody to make sure that it is done as quickly as it can be, but without taking on any unnecessary risk.
Yeah, it's back to that custodian guardian point. You're acting in someone's best interests, even if with respect to them, they may not fully understand why it is in their best interest in terms of risk profile. We'll come on to that in a specific elements to do with stamp duty in March 31st, because the concertinaing and pressure will continue to rise. But I'd like to bring in a question from Emma Maisie, who's our finance manager at Media Clash, who may or may not be going through a property move at the moment. And it's about this issue of comms. She's saying, how often would you recommend calling your solicitor for an update on the status of a transaction? Too often is just simply, it clogs up the system, but not at all means that the client, Emma in this case, feels outside the process. And manage that comms, particularly in these times.
So what we're trying to do at the moment is agree a communication strategy with the client at the beginning. So I have a number of clients who are overseas, and with time differences and everything else, obviously that is always brings its own challenge. But what we're trying to do is set up so that we talk at least once a week. As things happen, we communicate that by email. And then when things start to get closer to exchange and completion, then we've agreed that we will up that frequency. So it's more about, from our perspective, trying to understand what it is the client wants from us and having that strategy at the beginning, rather than having, and it sounds like she's a bit on the outside, rather than having somebody who, because the less responsive somebody is, the more inclined people are to chase and to phone and to email. So it's much better to agree that at the outset. So anything from, it might be every other day, in particular cases, it might be weekly, it might be less than that, depending on, if we know, going back to searches, if we know we're not going to get them for a month, then there's not really much to talk about in the meantime, but at least someone is assured that there is nothing to worry about in that time. And it's almost the communication for the fact that everything is okay, rather than the technical advice, if you like. It's that communication which is most important. Yeah,
it's somewhere between reassurance and managing expectations. Yes. That if they are, whomever they are, if they're part of a process, in this case perhaps with Mogers Drewett, there is a process that gets them through the other side, that you are the conduit to make that happen. the particular pressure on March 31st. Quick recap, Alison, if you may. What is the stamp duty holiday and what is its effect on current transactions?
So if you're buying your main residence up to £500,000, you don't pay any stamp duty. Anything on your main residence over 500, then you pay stamp duty, but that first 500 is ring fenced without an SDLT liability. What that means,
for those who don't understand, SDLT being...
stamp duty land tax. So in the old days, you used to, and I did it, you used to have to take your deed to physically be stamped in an office by a man with a machine and some wax, and then to carry it away. So sadly, that's not a thing anymore, but that makes me feel really old, actually, now I've said that. But basically what's happening is as long as you complete by the 31st of March, if it's less than 500, no stamp duty. Anything above that, then you get your first 500 for free, effectively. But it's the 31st of March by which you have to have completed to be able to take advantage of that.
And given the length of transactions, for the reasons you've explained, inherent length, but also with the complexity of the bottlenecking thing, if something takes 3 months to get done, we're very close to the end of March in effective terms already, given the Christmas factor. If you got an instruction this morning, how confident would you be at this stage of getting it over the line by March 31st?
I'm confident in what we can deliver and what we can control, and confident that we would throw everything at it to be able to meet those deadlines. What we are saying to clients is that you have to sort of plan for the worst and prepare for the best, really. So we're talking to clients about making sure that you can't write that money off, and we'd much prefer that you budgeted for it. If you need to, if things are then delayed and you have to go down that route, then we'd rather that you knew that now and prepared for it, rather than it comes as a surprise if it doesn't happen. We are hearing that some people are talking about having a cut-off point, and I wouldn't necessarily want to go as black and white as that. There's a move by the Law Society and other industry groups to push the government to extend the window. So whether or not that comes to fruition, I don't know, but there's a conversation around that happening, and there is some pressure to enable that to happen.
Do you think that might be, and obviously this is all hypothesis, but do you think that might be an actual extension, or is it going to be a little bit like football transfer deadline day, where the exact definition of a fax having been received, which it was recently, is somehow proof of transaction, whereas in reality it's a bit more porous and it goes a few days later than that?
Yeah, I think it will have to be a firm deadline, there's talk about whether it's being tapered in certain areas, or an extension, maybe lowering the level. There's lots of conversations around it, but it still has to come to an end date, just because certainty is the most important thing, really.
Yeah, and certainty is what, one way or another, we all crave, I guess, in these times. Patrick, wearing your very fetching former agent's hat, as well as your current legal hat, what do you think it will be like in February, where two parties are trying to get a deal done and it's increasingly likely they may not get it over the line? What will happen to value in that context, where both know value is going to be lost on one side if it doesn't happen?
I suppose, with how I would deal with it as an agent, I'm sure be very, very different to what lots of other people would do. But it's trying to understand from the outset that is actually a key to getting the transaction done. So if I'm talking to if I was talking to anybody now, certainly in the second half of January and throughout February, as you mentioned, it's making sure that actually, is that realistic? Finding out what the drive, what the motivation actually is to, obviously appreciate there's always going to be that financial side, but something that certainly I was talking about, and lots of agents have been talking about for the last 6 months or so, is that people will have planned to move in 2021 anyway. Some people can be more fluid with their plans and they can bring them forward. Other people are far more rigid. And actually, there may be some additional benefits offset by completing after the 31st of March in terms of what may happen in terms of property value. But I think to answer your question, actually, it's a case of understanding whether that is then going to be a deal breaker. Because if it is going to be a deal breaker, do you then have to return to the negotiation table and start talking about the purchase price? A seller then needs to probably decide whether or not they think that they're going to sell their property for the same price on the 1st of April, or whether our price is likely to drop by that, that 15 grand or so that the purchaser could potentially save. So it's not unusual, and I'm sure if you've got agents listening, I'm sure they're all very, very busy, but it's not unusual to return to the negotiating table. Getting a transaction from sale agreed to exchange of contracts has become progressively more difficult over, certainly over the last 10 years, but increasingly so, certainly over the course of my career in agency. And it's trying to, and I think that conversations at the outset then prevent some problems, not all problems, but some problems, and certainly problems of that nature, I think can probably be overcome at the outset by understanding whether or not that's a deal breaker, why that's a deal breaker.
That's what might euphemistically be called the late exchange of value, brackets haggling, has hitherto been typically the province of the agent to bring a deal over the line. Alison, do you think that the role of sort of honest broker will actually fall slightly more to legal companies such as Mogers Drewett, precisely because you need that sort of dispassionate approach to deal process making?
I think we would always want price negotiation to be handled by the experts in that transaction. So no, I don't want to be involved in price negotiation. That's absolutely the agents, and we obviously work with them on that. What's important is understanding what the effect of that price negotiation may be. So it's very simple to agree, for example, a 15k reduction. That's really simple between agent and client, and that's fairly straightforward. If we're buying something and there's been a reduction and there's a mortgage, then that means that we have to report that reduction to the lender. So that then brings us back to how quickly does the lender respond? What does that do to the loan to value ratio? How quickly can all of that be turned around? So what's massively important, and it seems so obvious, is communicating that, and with this role that Patrick has and that we're working on is increasing the understanding of what is maybe a very simple conversation around value and how to proceed, the knock-on effect that has ultimately on that time frame, which is the goal that everybody has, and that's really what we're trying to bridge that gap on.
And Patrick, again, this does of course go back to your agent perspective, but in this time as well. What is your expectation of value in property in Bath, April 1st onwards, i.e. assuming there's no stamp duty extension?
Well, thanks for giving me such a straightforward question to answer. That's so I think that it's very, very important to throw out all of the usual caveats. I mean, there was the expectation when we, in the middle of March earlier this year was that that value would fall anywhere between 5 and 15%. Those forecasts, and they came from very, very knowledgeable people, considered the very best experts in those fields, didn't account for the demand that this part of the world, particularly country houses as well, the countryside surrounding Bath, obviously the other areas that we cover as well, what the demand would be for that, and demand significantly outstripped the supply, because people couldn't, speaking from my own personal circumstances, the only houses that we could put into the market when the lockdown came to an end late May, so late May and into early June, were the houses that we had ready to go into the market at the end of February that we couldn't get put into the market, or we decided to be more take a pragmatic approach to, well, let's give it a few weeks and see what that demand was. We actually started putting houses into the market with virtual viewings before the end of lockdown, because we could start to see the demand seeping through from talking to buyers. What will happen next year? I think that there's still the leading forecasters are still suggesting that the market will probably soften after the end of March. What will demand be like as we get through February and into March? I think that as long as there's enough communication, again, where we're talking to clients and agents are talking to clients, we need sellers to have the confidence to put their houses in the market in February and March and in April, in order that you're giving a buyer a choice to make. I'll go all the way back to 2016, when we had the result of the referendum and a bit of a hiatus in the market that summer. And where I was at the time was, well, everyone was saying, well, we don't know how this is going to impact the market. We don't know what's going to happen to value. You could have sat around and asked yourselves those questions over and over again. The approach that I took at that time, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one, was to put stock into the market, because there was nothing available, so buyers didn't have a decision to make. It was very, very easy for them to say, well, there's nothing for me to buy, so I'm not going to buy. And you have a danger of things becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. So at that time, you put stock in the market, and buyers came back slowly but surely throughout late summer and into the autumn. Hey, there's been roadblocks every single calendar year for a very, very long time. But our plans generally tend to be our plans. And as I said earlier, people will have planned to move. So whether, I think that stock will dictate, and stock has dictated, the market conditions this year. So the message that we want to get out to potential sellers, and I'm sure agents will be exactly the same, and we're here to support them on that wherever we possibly can, is, if you thought about selling, don't change your mind because of the stamp duty. Buyers will still be there. They need to have a decision to make, and they need to have a product to buy.
And then there's also, there's the macro position of the stamp duty holiday ending, but there's all the micro currents, particularly in Bath. One might be the flight of capital from the capital, Londoners coming this way. Another might be the working from home, which I'd like to explore with you, the working from home effect, that people want bigger or nicer or extended space. The attraction of villages, not suburbs. Bath doesn't really have suburbs, but the attraction of villages in these times. And the interplay of that as against what may be the effect of the stamp duty, net, would you take the view that Bath is likely to be more resilient, both on supply of property, but also on pricing of property?
I think that history tells you that it is, Greg, absolutely. From the time that I spent working in Bath, and obviously the knowledge I have from working with a company that had an office in Bath as well. So you can see that transactional volumes are protected. I think that people in the immediate area take a slightly different view, and the lifestyle in and around Bath really appeals to people outside, certainly. This year there's been an awful lot of talk about Londoners. I think the important thing to say as well is that we are seeing, we're doing an awful lot of quotations for people buying additional homes at the moment. So there is so they're still paying their additional home stamp duty. And I think that's a very important thing to say, actually, is that people are still prepared to buy with a stamp duty charge of some degree. And I think that in its own is a testament to what someone might think the strength of the Bath and the immediate surroundings market is that it's always been seen as a good investment, a safe investment, and I don't see any reason why that would change. And that really goes back to saying that's why sellers need to be aware that if there's a softening of value, that will be transferred. I don't think anyone is, certainly not that I've seen, forecasting a wholesale drop off the cliff, but I think that will be protected, as I said, by stock.
Sure, you'll wish to parade a phalanx of caveats on this point, but as a general point, this working from home trend, the increasing number of people creating garden offices or extensions, whatever, do you think net that people should expect to get their value back from that, or is it simply you do what's right for you and forget value?
I think that value monetarily and value in terms of quality of life, actually, I think that the two are probably more linked now than they probably ever have been. And I remember talking to an agent over in Winchester earlier in the year, sort of talking about the traditional commuter belts losing some of their pull, if you like, because I think that lots of people, sort of post 2000, sort of around 2006, 2007, lots of people were moving out of the city and working from home on Mondays and Fridays, being in the offices Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and obviously when we had the global financial crisis, I think lots of people were then required back to their offices. Technology is obviously 10, 12 years more advanced, and the means of us having this chat and this broadcast today, this didn't exist back then. So the necessity of traveling around and being within a certain proximity to anywhere is definitely less of a factor now, and so people can be they can live further away, they can work from home depending on the industry, so therefore, it's marrying up the value of that. Certainly from an agent's perspective, any type of outbuilding or usable space for the last 6 months has been a home office, or it's been the ability to create a home office. So I think that there's definitely value in that.
Thank you. And Alison, as a steer, what are the limits between, say, a home or garden office and actually a substantive dwelling which requires planning permission? I'm thinking particularly there was a reasonably famous case about some chicken sheds which were sort of converted into temporary dwellings, which then became permanent, and at what point they became truly admissible from a legal perspective. Any top tips?
Don't build a second house in your garden and expect to get away with it is probably the best tip I can give. Yes, we deal with, as you say, outside buildings, office spaces, fancy sheds, that kind of thing. But anything which is, depending on where you are, you have permitted development rights which allow you to do certain things without planning consent. With a building which is in your garden, we also have to look at building regs if there's electrics and water and that sort of thing. So the minute you start to get into adding services and anything which could be used as ancillary accommodation, the best thing to do is to talk to the council first, because it becomes difficult to undo it or to rectify it once you're in the thick of a sale or a purchase.
Ancillary accommodation, is that what's also known as a sofa? If you have if you have electrics and somewhere where you could sleep, is that just off the scale, or if in doubt, ask, I guess,
if in doubt, ask. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, if in doubt, ask another question, because that clearly was a dumb question. Sorry about that. Let's move on to there are in reality there are a number of I'm sure perfectly good, and there are legal firms in Bath who have the technical expertise to get this sort of area across the line and so on. What actually makes Mogers different? And I'm going to ask you, Patrick, as a sort of a recent joiner, but you, Alison, as a long term. Why should anyone watching this think, actually, you know what, Mogers are the people to choose as opposed to unnamed others?
I think from my perspective, I suppose, it would, I suppose, my appointment by Mogers and the fact that they have decided that they want to take this route, really, certainly to an agent, whether they're buying or whether they're selling, and clients, is that ultimately we want to put the client at the absolute forefront of everything we do, and actually by providing a conduit, if you like, to make sure that we understand or collaborate with agencies better, and in ways it sort of goes back to answer the question that was posed earlier: how often do I need to phone my solicitor for an update as a former agent? How many times do you phone your agent? The most frustrating calls that you get are when, if you speak to your agent and you speak to the solicitor and you hear two different things. What we're trying to achieve here, even more so, because I think that, from my perspective, I always enjoyed working with Mogers on any transaction, whether it be in Bath, whether it be in Sherborne, whether it be in Wells. The professionals doing the job are all absolutely fantastic, and they've got a really, really good team. We've got a really good team here. So the key is that if we can get the communication right between us and our client, us and the agent, then actually the number of times that they'll need to call in will be fewer, because, as Alison said earlier, we'll be ahead of it. We'll have set those communication goals. The agents will have set those communication goals. It's very much then a team process, rather than I'm the agent, I've agreed a sale, I've done my bit. That's never the case, and any decent agent will tell you that the real hard work is then getting it from sale agreed over, across the line to exchange. But it's trying to make the phases of the process simple. Whether it's compliance, agents will tell you that compliance is an absolute nightmare. It's exactly the same for solicitors. Trying to get that initial phase of compliance, to get the file open, to get the work done. We're trying to find a way of simplifying that, making that quicker and easier, and not handled by, our experts, our solicitors and our conveyancers handling the transactions. They then have the time to just do the professional work that is required, and therefore it will get done quicker, it will get done better, and the whole process, the whole relationship will be better.
Alison, anything to add to that? Otherwise, I'll ask you another.
I agree with Patrick. But it is what this is, yeah, otherwise. But what this does is it means we can be more sophisticated about who within the team works with the clients that are coming in. So where we can match, just because we feel that the client is best served by somebody who is great with first-time buyers, or maybe somebody who works a lot with elderly clients, or whatever it is, it allows us to match as best we can the person that we're offering to provide support in the way that it is most efficient and most effective for the clients we have. And it just enables us to stand back and make that match, because that then provides a better experience for the clients going forward.
Great. A few years back, there was some concern in legal circles about the prospect of Tesco law, cheap cookie cutter, off-the-shelf contracts and so on, undercutting, frankly, even bypassing more traditional legal companies. That hasn't really happened, and to my knowledge, certainly hasn't happened in property. Why not, Alison?
I think going back to where we were talking about Bath being in a bit of a bubble and protecting itself, I think we are lucky to be in an area where we don't have that sort of competition locally, but it is something that we do still come across. We do still deal with sort of volume lawyers and people who sort of buy work in, and we do still come across those, but it's not as prevalent in this part of the country as it is elsewhere. And I think that's because there is a level of sophistication in this market, which is about understanding what you're doing, the value of that investment, and making sure that you get the right advice to get you through that process. Because we do often have people who come to us who've been through a sort of cookie cutter, or however you want to put it. They've had that experience, and they don't want to have that experience again. And that's really where we come in, and we can show those differences in value.
If nothing else, and it is much more than this, but if nothing else, you provide an insurance, I guess, in what, as you referred earlier, is the single largest transaction most individuals will do in their life. Well, you know, why not have the professional expertise to guide you through that?
Absolutely.
We've had a question from our very good friend, anonymous attendee, who's asked a point about that whilst working from home, of course, if you've got the capability, but more particularly the domestic setup, perhaps the home study, maybe even a garden office. But Bath has many apartments. Has that market been as solid in terms of activity and pricing? And would Patrick expect prices more likely to soften in that sector in the coming months? Apartments, Patrick.
I just had a look at the question as it came through, actually, and I think that I don't think that the one sector is likely to outperform another, or there to be let's say, plucking figures out the air, of 5% drop for apartments versus a 2% drop for a house. I don't see that, and I think that all I would say to that question is the point I made just a minute ago about people are buying investments. They are buying apartments. I've been carrying out an awful lot of the initial quotation and initial contact work over the last 6-7 weeks or so, and that market is very, very active. It's very, very fluid. I think that sitting on the fence, I think it's going to be very, 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 very difficult to predict what's going to happen in the market. Full stop. Certainly around late February, March, and into April. I don't anticipate there being I don't think an apartment will fare any better or any worse. I think the great thing about Bath is that it's made up of lots of lovely houses and apartments, and even through the toughest times that we've had, and the recessions that we've dealt with, and the difficult markets over the last 10 to 15 years, it's always been robust. So I don't think that there would be a particular issue there at all.
And hand in hand with that robustness, that resilience, is also the appetite for risk, which many people have in Bath, whether it's that, almost hesitate before saying safe as houses, but in terms of investments, property in Bath, as you've been saying, historically and currently, has proved a pretty sure asset. But Alison, in terms of your client base, that appetite for risk, are you having a sense that has tempered in current times, that people are waiting it out, sitting on their money before diving in?
No, if anything, I think it's the opposite. We certainly had a spike where I think people had sat in their houses for 3 months and decided they didn't want to look at the same 3 walls for any longer than they wanted to. So there's definitely movement around the family houses, which is something which I know can be very difficult in Bath because of that reluctance to put things on the market, which is what Patrick was talking about. But no, I think if anything, we found that people are having addressed what they want from their work-life balance and everything else. I think people are doing the opposite of that, and is almost a bit, life's too short and this is where we want to be, and this is how we're going to get there. And I think that's definitely more the client base that we have at the moment.
It's also, this whole pandemic has been a great big Rorschach test of personality, and there are those who absolutely just get on with it, and others who are inherently more cautious and so are sitting back. But as time changes, so those attitudes will change, presumably. We're at the end of our time, but we do have a very late question from Luke Carlis. He said, good morning, Luke. It's for both Patrick and Alison. In the last few months, have you seen mortgage valuations coming in below agreed prices? And then what is the most common outcome as a result of that? Mortgage valuations and pricing.
Shall I jump in and go first?
Okay. Yeah, come on.
And only all I would just say is that the answer, long and short of it, is yes, we did, but certainly, but very much from before I moved over. they were very, very good, very, very cautious in terms of straight out of lockdown, and I think that depending on the loan to value, that there were certain issues there and question marks over what the market was going to do. And I think that some lenders and valuers were looking at the market predictions rather than what was actually happening in the market, and I think they probably still are to a degree. So there was definitely some examples of it, but not too many. But I'll hand over to Alison about on the legal.
It's exactly the same. We've had a couple of down values, but and that's for a number of different reasons. But it is that loan to value ratio which is the most important one, and again that comes back to how robust the market is, because we don't necessarily see a lot of high percentage loan to value, so there is a bit of leeway as long as everybody ultimately ends up where they want to go, but it's not something that we're seeing a lot of at the moment.
Well, we are beyond our time, and we'll just give one last plug as we're closing to talking of the Bath Property Awards and Mogers Drewett relationship with that. Of course, there is a very large mortgage supplier in Bath, based in Bath, called L&C Mortgages, and I'm sure they would have very detailed perspectives on this exact point were you to beat a path to their door. We are going to beat our path away because we're through our hour now. Thank you both to Alison and to Patrick for your time, wisdom and insights this morning. Please look out for our next Bath Life Business Surgery about private client and financial planning, which will be fascinating, 1st of December, again with Mogers Drewett. Further afield in January, by the way, there'll be one with Juice on recruiting. And if anyone has a professional service, if anyone's looking for flying the flag and perhaps generating more business, please do talk to us. It's a very good way of showcasing a professional expertise in a sort of conversational style. That's the intent, at least today. Couple other plugs again. That's December 14th, Bath Life Business Club on charities and Christmas. Please talk to us about how you might be involved. And the very convivial wine tasting, not virtual wine tasting. We will literally be wine tasting, but we'll be talking over Zoom about the provenance and style and quality of those wines with 8 Stony Street, raising funds for the Bath Community Shop in Twerton. Please remember those Bath Property Awards nominations closing next week, and of course those lovely sponsorship opportunities for the Bath Property Awards and Bath Life Awards. I hope this has been a useful session. Our thanks to Mogers Drewett once again for going through the expertise in the area of residential property in Bath. Good luck, good wisdom to you all and to everyone. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been the latest Bath Life Business Surgery. Bath together. Thank you.